Rett Larson. Our key topic for today's chat will be high performance games, fun and preparation combined. So, for all those working in high performance sport, or even for the athletes that want to add more fun to their environment, make sure to stick around. We'll be spending a lot of time around that, as well as Rhett's career in high performance sport. But thank you for jumping on, Rhett. Really looking forward to our chat, which should be a unique one. I don't think we've talked about this yet on the show, so really looking forward to it, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Yeah, I hope that underneath, like, you need to change my caption to "Fun Pro." That's
Fun
that's
pro.
where,
I
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
right. Finally, those two, yeah, together at last, fun and professional.
Love that. Yeah, it's they go hand in hand, but one can either get mixed up with the other at times. I can imagine. Like you think if you're having too much fun, you're not serious enough, and if you're being too pro, you're probably not having enough fun. But yeah, I like the fact that you combine the two.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely, I don't know how it happened, but I've carved out a niche for myself where now it's kind of expected of me.
the
take
standards are
new
set.
jobs every now and then. It gets easier to implement kind of training the way I like to do it because everyone now comes to expect it.
Yeah, and also like being an S&C myself, at times it can some of the things that we try and do with the athletes can be quite dry, and consistency is so important. But to be able to do what you need to do from a physical preparation point of view, and for the athletes to be engaged and enjoy it, yeah, it must be something that we can all take from. But yeah, I guess before we get into the nitty gritty of it all, mate, give us a background for those that aren't aware. Already, people have reached out when I set the schedule to the socials. People are very familiar with your work and this topic. Like you mentioned, you've carved out a niche for yourself. But for those that aren't aware, yeah, give us a background, mate.
Yeah, I'm an American. I worked in America in strength and conditioning for about 15 years, specializing actually in younger athletes. And from like 8 years old until 18, that was my bread and butter with the company that I started with. And at some point got a really unique opportunity to go and work for a company called Exos and go over to China to lead a team of coaches and physios that would be working to prepare China's kind of gold medal factories, some of their most elite teams for the London Games in 2012. And so went over, did that, thought it was just going to be a 10-month stint. And, you know, I got to crave that adventure. I got to crave kind of the expat lifestyle. And I said I'd do it for another year to do a stint down in Shanghai, preparing the Shanghai athletes for the China Games. And then that went really well. And I said, I'll do it one more year. And, 7 years later, I finally decided that I'd take a break from China. I went and at that point, I'd specialized in women's volleyball for the last, for 3 years. And I decided to go take a summer and work with a friend of mine who was going to be the new head coach of the Dutch team. So I went to the Netherlands for 2 years. And yeah, just fell in love with working in Europe. And long story short, now I'm the strength and conditioning coach for the German national women's volleyball team. And I've just kind of stumbled into being a women's volleyball guy for the last 6 or 7 years. And yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but or what country I'll be living in. But yeah, I'm loving the ride.
Yeah, it's taking you to some great places around the world already, and some highly successful programs. That's awesome, mate. And the aspect of working in Olympic sports and then team-based sports, like you mentioned, you're not sure, what the future lies, but how much have you sort of carved out your career in terms of different sports you want to expose yourself? How much was it more organic that, the head coach that you mentioned you knew that, is it the people that you're going to work with that you select these jobs, or is it something that, yeah, it has been quite structured that you want to expose yourself to different environments over the last
Zero
15 years?
structure, Jack. Zero. I would
Go
never
with the
have
flow.
guessed 3 years ago that I'd be working in Germany now. I never would have guessed that I would have gone to China.
Love that.
I, I don't know, Woody Allen said it that, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And that's my life. So, yeah, I, I'm so comfortable. I've spent a lot of brain power with women's volleyball, and I really, really love, and it's been great going from China to the Netherlands, now to Germany. I really love that fun honeymoon period you get with athletes where they will just do anything you ask. And if you're figuring people out, you're solving the individual puzzles of what maybe the biggest handbrake to an athlete is. You get these fun breakthroughs every once in a while. I'm addicted to that. So, but right now I'm having a really good time. Yeah, I midway through my German stint, between my first and second year, the head coach switched. So I also got the challenge of having to figure out a new head coach. And my new head coach is a big personality, and he and I work real well together. But that's just been another challenge. So as all I know is that I keep liking the stimulus. I love to grow, and if that's staying in volleyball, but trying different countries, which it seems like it's been for a while. That's a unique challenge. Going from a powerhouse to an underdog provides another challenge. But I used to
Bring
be
on the
someone that
change.
worked in
Yeah.
every sport, and it's only been these last 6 years that I've gotten to really focus on one. And I'm having a great time, but who knows what will happen next?
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. It seems to be a common theme as well for those that have reached the pinnacle in elite sport. That yeah, and no matter what the type of sport they're working in, it wasn't the plan. It sort of found them through hard work and doing good work and let the journey sort of take you along for the ride, which is good for those studying as well. Probably not to set rigid plans, but to just let the good work take care of itself.
Yeah, I
In terms
will
of
say, Jack.
influences, yeah,
Yeah, I will say that I think the one thing I can guarantee that I'll always be working abroad. That I've gotten some really cool opportunities to come back to the U.S. They've slid across my plate, and just nothing sounds as good to me as. And I'm always giving this piece of advice to young coaches: like, be real open to getting out of your country. There's good money to be made for one. If you go some places, whenever you go out of your country, there's a better chance that somebody's going to pay for all your food and housing, so you get to net all the money they pay you. So there's financial advantages to it, along with all just the cultural, and if you're a storyteller, which I think a lot of coaches are, it's a great way to accumulate some crazy stories and adventures and hijinks. But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, some gems there for coaches
Yeah.
listening in. Absolutely. And then what about influences or mentors, if you like, along the way that have helped shape your philosophy?
I've been lucky. I got real lucky early on. My first job, once I decided to be a strength and conditioning coach, which was later in life. I decided when I was in my late 20s to go into this. And I got lucky because I joined a sports performance franchise, the same one that I told you that primarily worked with 8 to 18-year-olds when it was only one or two centers down in Georgia. And and I was in Georgia just because I was dating a girl from Georgia and I needed to get a job for the summer. And I go to this place, and it's called Velocity Sports Performance. And that summer, those three centers franchise out across the nation into, it was like 80 centers a year later. And it became the leading sports performance training network in the United States. And I had had a chance to train under the founder, who is just a first ballot Hall of Fame speed coach who's trained Olympic sprinters and jumpers all over the world, named Lauren Seagrave. And I've just, I've just by dumb luck, I've gotten to learn how to teach athletes to run faster and jump higher from one of the best of all time. And then it becomes, oh, well, where would you like to work across the country? And so I choose to go out to California, and I get into a Velocity Sports Performance franchise out there. And by another sheer amount of dumb luck, the coaches we had out there were incredible. And it became this, and even though it was a very regimented program, when you went out to train a group, it was small group training, 6 athletes. And when you went out to go train, 6, 12 to 15-year-olds, you had a sheet of paper and you had all the exercises were listed. But I'm looking at the other, it became a competition between all of us young kind of coaches, who could be the most popular coach at our Velocity franchise. Like, who was going to be the one that the kids are having their parents call in that day to say, hey, who's coaching the 6:30 group, right? You wanted, you wanted to hear the receptionist say, no, 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 Coach Rett's at 7. No, I'm sorry, that group's full. Like, you
Yeah, yeah,
needed,
yeah.
and and I heard it when it happened to the other coaches and it pissed me off. And it became, and maybe this is kind of the fundamentals of where my life is now, the way that I program now. But, within the structure of a sheet, like, how can
Mm.
I create fun? Like, how can I make this engaging? How can I make these athletes just be dying to come back and dying to be in my group? Like, how can I take these dry jumping jacks, series that we've been doing over and over again, because
Yeah.
by franchise rules, we have to stick to this. Like, what if I'm throwing tennis balls at people randomly and they have to catch it while they're doing these jumping jacks? Like, or I'm watching my other head coach across the turf and he's doing that. I'm like, you son of a bitch. God, that looks fun. Oh, and now my wheels are turning. And I was 10 years of that, and of kind of having to, you eat what you kill kind of out there. Our center was always trying to be the top center in the nation, and we were trying to outperform everybody. And we wanted to be the most fun center in the network. And I wanted to be the most fun coach in the most fun center in the network. So I would say that group of coaches, it's not exactly a mentor, but we already had this wonderful backbone of really good speed mechanics and the ability to train athletes to be faster. But just kind of that motivational part that, we're always really pushing ourselves to
Give it that
be the
edge.
fun ones. That was incredibly important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, I like that you sort of mentioned that the fundamentals of the purpose of your role was done at such a high, world class standard, and then now it's like, how can we make it better? That's by
Right.
engaging and bringing them along for the ride and giving them a real experience. So obviously, as coaches, developing coaches, I imagine you want to get that aspect right first in terms of
Yeah.
your basics and what we're there to do. But then when you can take it to another level in terms of engagement and bring them
Yeah.
along for the journey.
You have to learn all those rules before you can break them a little bit, right? You
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to,
yeah,
you couldn't take, oh gosh, if I'm thinking of that example, you couldn't take the jumping jacks and then take the legs out of it, right? Like, you couldn't do that, because then you're not getting the thermogenic part of the jumping jacks, which is really what you need out of the stupid jumping jacks. But
yeah,
you could change the arms into something that's a little bit different, in a different plane, to mix the athletes up so they're falling over themselves, but cracking up laughing, but still sweating, and one of them takes a tennis ball to the face when they're not looking. Like, all of that is legit and is okay
yeah,
within the program, because you're still accomplishing the main task of getting them warm, but they're also laughing their asses off. And so
yeah.
that's just ticking an extra box.
And take us back to that. You mentioned there was a structure that was starting to be created when you're creating these sessions. Is that visual? Are you sort of, pen and paper out, writing
Yeah.
things down? Yeah, take us through that process, I guess, the night before
Yeah, well,
a
as a
main day,
franchise,
training
like,
day.
it was legit. Like, we had a library of workouts, and you looked at your menu, you looked at your 6 athletes that were coming in, and you said, okay, I have 2 that have been here for 18 sessions, 2 that have been here for 12, and 1 that's on their first. I need to pick something in this range of the library, and today is a maximum velocity day, so it has to be in this library book, and you would pull a workout. So I mean, like, you still had to work that sheet, and we definitely pushed the limits on what we could get away with, but that's kind of where the fun was.
Yeah,
And success made our owner not so upset when we would go a little bit too far, maybe. And we
yeah,
would,
yeah,
as
100%.
long as,
Everyone wants to be fully booked.
yeah. And it's one of these things, and this is I think, a really overlooked part of what we do, and especially when you get to the Olympic level, where I don't have to, it's not like they're paying me every month. It's not like these athletes are, are my clients that would choose to not come to a strength workout. They have to come to a strength workout. But
Mm,
I think compliance is something, like, just getting athletes wanting to come back. This is something that, if you've ever heard of John Berardi, he's the founder of Precision Nutrition here in the United States, which is like one of the best nutritional certifications you can get. And Berardi, said, just stop asking me about, like, what supplements would be best for your client, whatever. Just, like, the best workout in the world that nobody wants to do is useless. Like,
mm.
a shitty workout that is super fun and is engaging and gets people dying to come back is better than that best workout. And stop taking yourself so seriously and start making your workout something that people are compliant with and want to do over and over again and tell their friends
Yeah.
about.
Which is, yeah, so refreshing to hear that even at the top level where you are preparing for something that's so big in the Olympics, that
Right.
fun aspect and that engagement is still so important. Let alone, yeah, like with those learning the sport and developing as well, where retention is starting to get lower and lower. I imagine each decade
Right.
of kids being active. So, Both very, very important. What about highlights when you look back? Anything that spring front of mind that you're proud of
Oh, I
over
mean,
your
back
career?
in the day when my I guess when most of my experience was with the young kids, like it was with some of those kids that you would get when when they were like 9. There was a kid named Mike Wookert that we started training when he was 8 or 9, and he ended up, making his big time football team as a freshman. He ended up setting all his school records in the clean. He ends up going back to school. He goes to college to be a strength and conditioning coach. He's still
Yeah,
trying to
wow.
make the Olympic team in weightlifting. Like that was like the thing that I would tell every, beam with pride and send him messages every time he posted a new PR video on Facebook. But then you go to China and you get to work with the best athletes you've ever seen and best in class. And for the London Olympics, I worked with diving and gymnastics and shooting and some of these gold medal factories, and you get to meet these multi-time gold medalists, and that becomes like a different kind of highlight. But especially before the London Olympics, that was a lot of individual sports because that is where China makes all of their Olympic medals. Like they
Mm,
only care about individual sports because they can get the most medals that way. If you put $1 million into the shooting team, you can get you can get like 12 gold medals out of it. If you put $1 million into the women's basketball team, you could at best get one medal, right? So it
yeah.
doesn't make any financial sense for them. So it was all individual teams, and it wasn't until the 2015 when I got to be with China's most popular team sport, which is women's volleyball, that it was a real new experience for me. I mean, I'd never been on a everyday all day team. I'd always been with London. I sat in the weight room all day, and women's table tennis came to me at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then at 10:30 the diving team came to me, and then at 1:30 rowing came, and blah blah blah. It wasn't like what happened to me in 2015 when I got hired just by the women's volleyball team, and I was just spending 10 months a year with one team, morning, noon, and night. Um, but but being part of that team when they won the World Cup in 2015, which was at the time China's second ever medal in a team
Yeah,
sport,
wow.
men or women, and then repeating that again at the Olympics, getting a gold medal in Rio, I couldn't, bye bye kids. I don't care about them anymore. That's not my best memories. No,
Have been
There's a
trumped.
lot of fun stuff otherwise. I had a
Yeah.
yeah. So those were just incredible, Disney movie moments that were super super fun.
And how'd you go about adjusting your coaching style with different cultures and bringing that fun and engagement when there's language barriers and these other aspects that not necessarily your degree will teach you?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges for me in going to China was, of course, giving up language because I
Mm,
couldn't immediately knew I couldn't stand working with a translator. Like just so cumbersome and having that divide, that little barrier in communication that just I felt like kept me from really getting the relationship. So, I aside from really studying my ass off on Mandarin, you learn to adapt. And instead of all of the like being kind of as witty as I can try to be when I'm with my normal, my English speaking athletes, you learn other ways. You learn slapsticky physical comedy. You learn like how to make constraints that will accomplish, how to adjust your warm up game so they have constraints that accomplish what my verbal commands used to accomplish. So if I needed people to get low, I can't just say get low. At least initially, I had to just shoot Nerf bullets over their head and tag them in the forehead until they got their head underneath it, right? So
yeah.
you learn to adapt that way, and so I don't know. That's my inclination. That's the way I want to adapt. I'm thinking, how can I make this a win-win? Like I don't have to shout at them to get low over and over again, and they get to be smiling because I'm tagging people with Nerf darts over and over again in their ear. So, and that's kind of where I guess the beauty, that's where the struggle I think resulted in something that worked out for both of us. And culturally, the Chinese are, as you'd expect, it's a very strict system. It is the strictest they have a Chinese maxim that the strictest teachers create the best students, and The women's volleyball team, almost every team I've ever been a part of in China was no exception. Just very dogmatic, very,
Discipline,
unsmiling,
yeah,
and
yeah.
tough coaches. But I think what became kind of my yin and yang to that is that I would be kind of the fun one, and I'm only, I realize that I'm allowed to be the fun one as long as I'm also the one who delivers. You
Yep.
can't just be the fun zany one if they never break a sweat, if their squat numbers don't go up, or more specifically, if their vertical jump numbers don't go up, or their speed doesn't go up, or their body weight doesn't come off, or body fat doesn't come off. Like I got to be able to put up the numbers. But once I show that I can get things accomplished, then I could say, okay, let me put some of the magic in it. Let's get things accomplished because the girls will work hard for me because I've engineered this, that they're actually having a good time, or that they are incentivized, that I've gamified the system so much that they refuse to not give 100%.
Yeah. And for a coach going into a new environment, was that very much sort of the process? Get the operation team, the tactical coaches on board first, and then you can really do what you need to do once you show
Yeah.
those results. And
100%. You can't. One of the things when other coaches would come over to China, one of the things I would caution them about, I'd say, hey, we're about to put you with, men's junior badminton. You're about to walk into their weight room, and the first thing you're going to do is observe their weight training session as it is. You're about to like write a million notes about how horrendous it is and how many terrible things they're doing. You need to pump the brakes. Like
mm,
you need to be asking yourself, what of these things, what 70% could I keep? And just add a little bit of something. And the way you guys do that, I like that exercise. Let me just tweak it a little bit so that you guys don't look so horrible I could never post a video of it. All right.
yeah,
So I'll just make these little tweaks, and then as you build street cred, which there's so many tricks, Jack. Like in my first week with any team, I had a weight training session that I know would make everybody's glutes so sore that they couldn't like take a poop the next day. Like, and
mm,
that was crucial because it's showing the head coaches, like the head coaches would come over to me just giddy. Oh my God, the girls, they can't laugh today because they said their abs hurt so badly. Okay, yeah, all right, yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. It sounds like they're just not strong. I guess I could probably
yeah,
help you with that, right?
yeah.
So it's little things that I can put in there that build my street cred, right? That is getting some sweat equity, some soreness equity, and then from there, but I'm still keeping 70% of their just terrible exercises. But then that number goes next week to 60 and then 50. And then a month later, it is 100% rep programming, and everyone and no one's giving me any flack. And that's the way I did it with every team that I ever worked with in China.
Chip away at it. Yeah. And get everyone on board. We talked about challenges before with language barriers, and you talked about finding a way. Would there be other career challenges that you've faced that have been sort of growth moments? And if so, what have you learned from it?
Good question. Yeah. There have been, oh boy. Yeah, there've been some definite, I mentioned like body fat. Like weight is one of those things, like especially with women's teams, body fat is something, and nutrition, I should say, is something that is a really dicey subject in some cultures and really open. In China, it'd be like, hey, come over here. This is Fat Alice. We call her Fat Alice because she's fat. And you're like, oh, Alice, are you okay? She's like, yes, I've always been fat. Yes, I'm very fat, but at least I'm not stupid Nancy. Like they're just
Yeah, they're
super
blunt.
blunt, and it is something you just tackle head on. Every girl is writing her weight down before breakfast every morning, and they step on a
Yeah, well,
scale, and then you got sorted into a group. And I have so many great stories about fat shaming that would have gotten me fired in every other country I've worked in, but I could get away with it in China because they just want the blunt honesty as long as it gets results, and we can take measures that you couldn't otherwise. But in other countries, in the Netherlands, it's dicey, and in Germany, it's dicey, and you have to do things like, and so it becomes this really big challenge, especially, in some of the countries where we didn't have a registered dietitian or a nutritionist on staff. And I have to do that, which is my nightmare, that
mm,
I'm doing like super subtle things. Like, what I do? I would take a scale and I would put it under the assisted jumping rack. So, you have a rack with a pull-up bar that's really, really high in the air, and you can loop a big super band through it. And we'd loop it under our armpit so that when we did jumps, it would take away, say, 3 kilos of our body weight, 5 kilos of our body weight. And I would have all the athletes kind of measure take their weight off of it, and then move the scale under it, put the band on, then and then see how much they weighed when I took some of their body weight away with the band that is looped above them on that pull-up bar. Does this make sense so far?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then they take the scale away and they're standing on the jump mat, and then they do their jumps, and I register how high their block vertical jump is when they weighed 10 pounds less or 5
Yeah.
pounds less, depending on the band I used. And that was the passive aggressive way. Then girls would be like, oh my God, I was flying. Did you see that? I felt like I was floating in air. I'd be like, I guess that's how you jump every time if you just weighed 5 pounds less. Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna leave
Wow.
that
Yeah,
there.
just leave that right there. We'll just see what happens. Yeah. And so, like, it's having to
Dangling the
be as
carrot.
creative as possible to solve these little problems as they come up. But yeah, these are the challenges that I'm talking about when I talk about like how much fun it is to jump around cultures and teams.
Yeah, 100%, and it's probably probably why we all love what we do, is because of the different nature that we need to find and navigate and problem solve and find a way to get our message across and like you
Right.
mentioned, get the results. Going into the keen topic, which we'll just break it down into fun and pro, like you said in the first intro. You may have touched this on earlier with working with the 8 to 18-year-olds, but at
Hmm.
what point in your career did you realize how important fun really is in a high performance environment?
I did touch on it a little bit, but let me give you another example from those years that on Fridays, I think it was on Fridays, I'm a little fuzzy. It was like Fridays and Saturdays, instead of kind of the regular conditioning that we do at the end of those groups, our young training groups, our little groups of 6,
Mhm.
we do a little conditioning at the end. And instead of that, like every Friday, we would play knockout. Have you ever heard of that? It's a basketball game where basically all 6 kids line up behind the free throw line. The first 2 kids have basketballs. The first kid is at the line and he gets to shoot the first free throw. Immediately after it leaves his hand, the second person is allowed to step up to the line and shoot it. And if the second person makes the ball in before the first person, that person is knocked out of the game.
Yeah.
And so, once you make it, you toss to the next person in line. It's this rapid, it's just a cacophony of noise. Kids are going crazy. They freaking love it all week. The kids are just saying, can we play knockout instead of doing this? Can we play knockout instead? Can we play knockout? And if you sit back and look at knockout, like there's a ton of good stuff happening. They're all panting like crazy. They are, when a rebound goes awry, they have to make a reaction move. They have to go and get it. There's teamwork, not teamwork. They're all individual, but you're passing the ball off. There's a lot of great fundamental things to this like, why is it something that we just treat them with on Fridays or Saturdays? Like, why can't we just spend a little bit of time thinking about all the really like boring masochistic ways that we do conditioning and just find ways that are actually fun as well as really, really brutal? It's the difference between a cone drill where you have 2 cones 5 yards apart and you have to run and touch one, then the other one you're doing it over and over again. Well, take one cone away and make that a balloon that you have to keep in the air, and you've just done the exact same drill, but you've made it something that they think is fun, at least initially, until they feel like they're going to throw up when they have to do it 12 times. But it takes very little kind of brainstorming to be able to tweak a lot of exercises we've been doing for a long time to make them something that the athletes like. It's like when people see that my athletes do some dancing sometimes. Like for me, I can't fathom that I'm sure every one of the coaches that is critical of something like that does agility ladder drills, which how can you possibly think that those are different? Except one kind of sucks more than the other one. Like, so
Yeah, I was
anyway.
actually watching one of your videos the other week, and if you look at physically what's being done, like with no audio, the shapes and everything that's being hit from a mobility point of view and quickness and your
Yeah.
accelerations and footwork is being done, which is
Yeah. It's
but they're
really,
smiling and they're
right.
they're
There's,
loving it.
I kind of push back at this kind of the myopic kind of view that things have to be done the way that these best practices have always been done in strength and conditioning. So I think that was kind of the where these ideas would germinate is when you would realize that yeah, you can make you can put parts of Friday knockout day into every day of the week. You can take a harder look at all the stuff we're doing and see if there's a way that without compromising what the real goal of that drill is, to tweak it to make it more engaging. Sometimes that's as
Yeah.
simple as just having people partner up and cooperate, right? Like or any number of, I could go on and on, but I think that's pretty much where it started. And then China, like I said, I was a little bit of that yin and yang that I really went out of my way to try to find ways to make things like conditioning and then eventually warm up, which used to be very rote and same thing every time for them, something that was engaging and stimulating. And I'm just anti-zombie. I just don't want to see athletes sleepwalking through anything I do. And I will stay up all night before a training session to make sure that doesn't happen. And then you just end up building a big ass library full of kind of of warm-ups and calisthenic activities and thermogenic activities and conditioning work capacity activities that all have a little tweak to them that I think is the secret sauce to make it fun.
Yeah, and going back to the China experience, like I can only imagine it would have been quite a contrast experience for those athletes on the way you're explaining it. Did it take a little while once you got buy-in from the coaches and everything, and you got to do exactly what you wanted to do, and it was 100% your program? Did it take a while for the athletes to actually let go of the seriousness of everything and appreciate having fun,
This is
or
a
did it
great
sort of just
question.
come
Actually, it's a
intuitively?
great question. And actually, the athletes are the easiest. They are all little kids. I mean, I can say this because none of them will listen to this podcast, but they're all in this kind of arrested development a little bit. They've been in Chinese sports schools since they were very small, and they, have a very sheltered life. And they're
Yes,
the
they've been
type,
deprived from play,
yeah, like all of
basically.
my
Yeah.
20-year-old, gold medalists travel with teddy bears, like multiple
Mm.
teddy bears, right?
Mm.
And candy and sweets. Like if you looked into their backpack, you would think that they were 8-year-olds. And
Yeah.
yeah, and they're used to, coaches have to take away their phones at night, in hotel rooms. Like it's so if I'm proposing something fun, they are the easiest sell. It's when you
Yeah.
get to the Netherlands and Germany that you will occasionally, and fortunately this is the exception of the rule, but on every team there's one or two that are either too cool for school, at least a little bit. Like maybe the
Mm.
best player on the team doesn't, to do this you have to have a certain amount of vulnerability. You have to be willing to look like a fool. Like
Yeah.
much of what I'm going to do is push athletes to the messy outer edges of their athleticism. It's fun, but fun for me is also how far can I push the coordination of this exercise until you're all failing and hopefully laughing while you fail. You haven't hula hooped in a while, you haven't thrown a frisbee in a while, you haven't hacky sacked in a long time. I'm not going to do it enough that you get good at it. I'm going to do it I'm going to do it just enough that you have to struggle, and I love seeing the struggle. And you're a great volleyball player. Can you be a good volleyball player while you're also keeping a balloon afloat? Can you be a good volleyball player when your right eye has an eye patch over it? Can you do it all just with your left hand? So I'm gonna make you, and fortunately, this is not just philosophy of Rett. This is very well established, like differential learning, constraints
Yeah.
led approaches to training.
Yep.
That
Yep.
science is backing this up, but if you're talking about challenges that coaches could have getting into this, it's going to be getting buy-in from some athletes
Mm.
that don't want to look silly dancing, even though that's just a thermogenic with a little bit of, hand-eye, foot-eye coordination, foot-brain coordination. Um, but yeah, that is a real challenge sometimes too. And you have to, so some people it's spitting out big words like differential learning and talking to them about how I'm going to just put so much noise into the system, so many perturbations into this system, that what I'm trying to do is boost a signal out of it. I'm trying to build your library of of techniques and of movements so that when you are in competition, a bunch of things maybe come to you that wouldn't have already come to you, that you have that all this variability in this warm up is just creating hopefully a more adaptable athlete when we go to war.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so maybe they have to hear that.
Yeah,
Maybe they
education piece.
yeah, maybe you have to educate them, and especially early on when I'm doing something a little bit crazy, that's a big speech that I'll give with coach so coaches can hear. Like they also need to know that there's some brains behind this as well. Um, that this
Like
is
you mentioned,
not
the
just
science. Yeah.
me doing it to entertain myself. Yeah, exactly.
And
But
yeah, that was
yeah,
actually going to be a follow-up question with the athletes, and they might even be the leaders and the star players that have a big influence on the group that are closed-minded and not open to it early. But I think you explained that process really well with how you tie it back to game performance and how they're going to have a bigger library of movement competency. So that answered that aspect in terms of like. That keeping the main thing the thing, like you touched on that a little bit earlier, that it's not like you're throwing all the strength and conditioning principles and methods out. You're still doing those, and then you're just adding your flavor to it to keep it interesting for the athletes. For those coaches that are still in that mode where it is starting to get a bit dry, they're noticing their athletes. It's a long competitive season. They're starting to lose that motivation or engagement, perhaps in warm ups and things. When you're starting to adopt this style, what are some common mistakes that you've noticed, or perhaps you made early in your career? Um, in terms of integrating this philosophy into your strength and conditioning.
yeah. You have to, as I kind of alluded before, you have to earn the right to be able to do this. You have to. You've fortunately, like I said, like now everyone knows what to expect, and it's lucky that my Chinese team was so successful that now not many people push back. But for a new coach, I mean, you have to understand why you're doing. You have to, if you're going to have a hacky sack, if you're going to be doing a hacky sacking like group hacky sack competition, you've got to mention the word that this is helping hip mobility, that this looks silly and fun, but the
Mm.
fact that I'm not letting you that I've just after round one, I no longer let you hit it off of your shoelaces. You have to do, external and internal rotation to hit. Well, that's because I've tweaked this. I've put another constraint on this game so that it hits the internal and external rotation of your hip that actually my physical therapist is very, very concerned about on our team. And
Mhm.
so it's just peppering them with more of the why to justify the fun craziness. It's a little bit of that. That's definitely one of those things. Making and if stuff is too easy, it's really easy to just, or it is a mistake to just kind of take every single childhood game. Like, do you guys have Duck Duck Goose over there? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
a
yeah. Yep,
around the world?
yep.
Okay, so Duck Duck Goose, staple children's game, and yeah, there's a lot of curvilinear running, I guess, but just for two people while a bunch of people are sitting, and it's up to, you know, it's up to people who gets picked, and it could just be that everyone picks the slow three girls over and over again. Like
Mm.
that's a terrible game. Like I would never do that with my team. It might make for a good YouTube video, but it our Instagram video, but it wouldn't actually be successful unless I put a ton of constraints on it. And I have to really sit down and think about how I can make Duck Goose a game that didn't have a bunch of people sitting around bored, either wanting to get picked or not wanting to get picked. So you really need to take a hard look at every game that you would choose to do, because I get a ton of inspiration from we call physical education teachers, from elementary school camp counselors, people like that, as well as the folks that are doing a bunch with constraints led approaches and differential learning. But you need to take a look at whether or not rock paper scissors can be modified to be a good thermogenic warm up game or conditioning at the end. And so you need to take the time to do that, or just make sure that if you're going to have something that is just pure fun and silliness, that it is superset with something that's a grind.
Mhm.
So there, it's not. I don't want anyone listening to think that if you're doing a Rett warm up, it's just like, oh, we're learning to juggle over there, and then it's a hula hoop races over there, and then we're just seeing who can bat a balloon off their head the longest in that third group. No, it's generally there's something fun happening in one of in one little part of a circuit maybe, but my physios are going to kill me if I don't get a bunch of isos done early in the season. So there's girls sitting in an isometric lunge. Now, of course, me being me, I'm going to find every way I can to make sitting in an iso lunge interesting, competitive, fun. But I can only make an iso lunge so fun. And so you have to have that balance is the
Mm.
long-winded answer to this, is that if you're going to be fun, you got to have to be able to balance out with some real work getting done.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for explaining that and giving context into different scenarios and how you can apply it. Last question, because you've answered there in terms of where you get your ideas from, how you lean on PE teachers and physical education teachers.
Yeah, and Jack, I
And
should say also, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'd be
yeah,
remiss if I didn't say I get most of my ideas by watching practice, because I'm just sitting there watching the head coach. I'm like, oh, look at that drill. Okay, so in that drill, the girls have to, like, oh, the girls have to, let's say, get deep on defense or something like that. All right, and the coach is yelling at them about their butts being too high on defense, and I'm like, brain turning. Okay, tomorrow in warm up, what can I do? All right, I make everybody touch the floor. I'm gonna make some of warm up look like volleyball practice. I'm gonna do this exact same drill, except I'm gonna tweak it and I think make it even better. I'm gonna put weight vests on everybody, and I'm gonna have everybody have to touch the floor before they dig the ball, and then touch the floor after. That will be the constraint of the game. And my hope is that the next day, like, I am just mimicking, I'm parroting everything that the head coach was saying the day before. I'm asking the coaches to come over and help me do the technique on it, because it's still, just for me, it's the thermogenic, but it's also ticking a box of doing exactly what the head coach has been working on in practice.
yeah, yeah,
The girls like it because of volleyball's involved, right? It's a little bit gnarly because, they're wearing weight vests, or they have to, after they pass the ball, they have to, roll a medicine ball from between their legs, something that gets their butt low. And I've just created a constraint that's solving a problem that my team has. So I get a ton of ideas just by watching practice and thinking about, all right, all the tools in my toolbox, how can I possibly accomplish what he's looking for in a different way from a kind of S&C slant?
yeah, yeah. So it's not just the physical side and the athlete's enjoyment side. Now it's the tactical, technical side, bringing the
Right.
coaches along for the journey
Yeah.
too, and getting them involved, which is great. So,
Right.
um, last question: what about when you're working with male individuals or male teams compared to female? Is there a difference for fun and engagement? Can you use the same games? Is it different coaching cues? Talk us through your process there.
It's real. This is tricky because I would say, from from a youth and like standpoint, definitely big differences. When you're training young, there's the boys being a little bit more aggressive when they're younger. When puberty hits and they're like peacocking constantly and they want to show off, and the women sometimes being more reticent in the puberty ages, but the girls being badasses when they're younger. Um, at the elite levels, uh, they're both hyper competitive. So I would say that at the non-elite levels and the younger levels, that the boys tend to be, in my experience, tend to be more competitive, and, like, don't mind, they hate losing, but, like, don't mind something where somebody's going to lose. Whereas sometimes I've made the mistake of creating too many competitions for women's, younger women's groups, and you can just tell everyone except for one person is miserable, that, and they just want to, they would much rather be working in teams than as
Mhm,
individuals. And
mhm.
so I think that's kind of a difference at the lower levels. At the elite levels, the girls on my teams would cut each other's throat to win a stupid game of, like, balloon volleyball. Like, they're ridiculously competitive. So yeah, I think I don't. The better the athletes get, the less of a big difference I see.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, thank you so much on shedding light on that process. You can tell it's something that you're passionate about and clearly an expert in as well. So I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and knowledge in that area. Last few questions from a personal point of view, mate. What's your pet peeves? What makes you angry from an industry point of view, or even
Uh,
working on your craft?
get your pen and paper ready. I'm about to put individuals on blast. I'm naming names. No. Um,
Name and shame.
Oh man, no one's asked me this question before, and I'm so happy you did. All right, so here's a pet peeve. As somebody that has to go into weight rooms across the world all the time,
Mm,
of course, a messy weight room is awful. But I worked in China; every weight room is awful and messy, so I kind of got over that. Here's my latest pet peeve: is when you go into elite training center and the 20 kilo and 25 kilo plates are on the bottom of the stack. When
they're the
a weight
heaviest.
stack on a rack is set up just in number order so that the super light weights are at the top and then the heaviest weights are at the very bottom. It always strikes me as a place where no one's ever gotten super strong. Like those 25s are just dusty. Like, come on.
Yeah.
You have to put the heaviest plates at chest level. Like, it's just stupid. I hate it. It drives me crazy. And if I had to come up with a punishment for someone, it would be going into a strange weight room and having to and rearranging their weights to something acceptable to me. But on a team stand in my team, I think everyone on the teams I've worked for would know that I get just horribly sarcastic, which is a really crappy way that I show my annoyance when I have someone who never knows the sets and reps. You know, where I'm like, okay, everybody, on this exercise, we don't usually do 8s, but I want everybody doing 3 sets of 8 on this exercise, and I'm just waiting. I go to the next exercise, and somebody's like, hey, back on that one. What are the sets and reps? Like, there's always one girl. There's 1 or 2 on every team that are always, and I end up having to, I put them in charge of sets and reps. Like, I'm like, I say it once, I'm like, hey, by the way, if anyone has any questions, Tatiana is the one that knows all the sets and reps. So don't ask me, ask her. Like, I'm super annoys the shit out of me anyway.
Love that. There's always one, so we'll have to steal that one and put that to practice. That's a good method. What about favorite way to spend your day off?
Oh man, I feel a lot of social pressure to talk about my 3-year-old daughter. Oh God. But let's see. I would, I just got finished playing beach volleyball with my buddies this morning, actually yesterday morning, and there's no way I'd rather start a day than with a bunch of guys that I can just talk smack with while we play old man terrible beach volleyball for a couple hours, and then I love a good brewery. I like a good sitting down telling stories. That's kind of my favorite. It's my favorite stuff. But of course, I got a cute 3-year-old that it also takes a lot of my heart away. So that's a good one too.
Well said. And what about what's on the horizon for 2023? We're early or late March going into early April at this time of year. What are you excited about at the moment?
Well, Jack, we are writing the beginning of the big underdog story to make the Olympics in Paris next year. So, we are currently sitting about 13th in the world. The German women's volleyball team sitting about 13th ranked in the world, and pretty much the top 10 get a ticket in. So we've got to knock off some teams, and this is the first year that is an Olympic qualifying year. So we have the big World Cup coming up, and we need to upset some people and get some points and knock off some. And so we're in the hunt. So it's going to be a big year for hunting. We get some cool countries too. I haven't been to Korea before. I'm going to Israel in a couple of weeks. So I got to stamp that passport a couple times in a couple different places that I haven't before. So I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those that have got any follow-up questions, Rhett, where's the best place to get in contact, mate? Is it socials or?
Yeah. I think on Instagram I'm Rettosaurus. So it's I guess it's
link in the show notes.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. And that's where during the off season I kind of go a little bit silent while I enjoy my family time. Off season being the winter, but coming about a month from now or less than that, I'm gonna start amping it up again. That's where I post tons of examples of what I do in the warm-ups in the weight room to gamify and create energy and athletes that are having a good time and in those environments. So if people are interested in getting some real examples other than the ones I kind of came up with off the top of my head here, that's a place to look.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been following your page, and for anyone that's listening to the podcast, you'll absolutely have to take up that offer. So you might be listening while driving, so absolutely click the link in the show notes when you're finished parking the car, and you won't regret it. There's some great actionable straight away to talk. Basically visualize what we've done and put it straight into practice. Thanks for posting that content as well on behalf of the coaches looking to put your work to practice. Well, thank you, mate, again for your time, and really looking forward to publishing this podcast. We'll release it next Wednesday. So for those that have tuned in halfway through live, you can watch this on YouTube from now till then. And our next interviews with James Hanisch, they will be Friday, the April 7th at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I'll see you guys then. Thanks again, Rett.
Jack, when you post this, I'm going to be heading to the airport to fly over to Australia. I'm going to be there for a couple of weeks doing some presentations and workshops. Yeah, for AIS in Victoria and
next week,
Sydney. Yeah, I'm going out the 10th. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll be coming your way.
Good timing. Yeah. There you go. Aussies, hit him up. Thanks, mate.